Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Oh, it's afternoon. Sorry. Um, we are on our last webinar from our LEAF consultants for this month, and exit planning is good business strategy. A good way to end our consultant series, right? Um, I'm Heidi Edwards Dunn with the New Hampshire Small Business Development Center and the Education and Communications Director. And I'd like to just tell you a little bit about SBDC, in case you don't know who we are. We are the Small Business Development Center. We are a program that was instituted by Congress, and we've hit our 40th anniversary and then some. We do one-on-one business advising, confidential expert business advising with New Hampshire small businesses. We also do education like this webinar, and we have e-courses and other things on our website, resources that you're welcome to use. We are an outreach program of Paul College, and we're funded through the U.S. Small Business Administration, the state of New Hampshire, and the University of New Hampshire. You can see that we are divided into 3 regions. This is how we handle our business advising, and we have teams in each of those regions that know the local communities and can help you to find resources within your local communities. Thank you. We worked with over 1,900 clients in 2024, and they had an impact of $254.6 million on the annual economic impact of the units of the New Hampshire. They had that economic impact on New Hampshire. And through that, we supported 6,500 jobs. Our clients do amazing things, and we are very proud of the work our clients are able to do and the success that they have. Some of our programs, this is one of them. This is our LEAF program, Legal Accounting and Financial Services. And through this program, if you are an SBDC client, you can apply for 5 hours of free consulting time with attorneys, accountants, and financial services professionals. If you have a contract that you need to get set up or that you want someone to look at, you can use that time with an attorney for that. If you are just getting started on QuickBooks, or you'd like to do some reporting on QuickBooks and you don't know how to do that, they can help. We can help set you up with the right person to do that. Brad, our speaker today, is a CFO. So there are those kinds of services as well within that program. But we do a number of other things, from exporting programs to cybersecurity. And all of those are free programs within that, as long as you're a client of SBDC. And there are some things like these webinars that are free to the world. We're glad to have Brad, who is one of our consultants, as I said, Brad Caton, presenting today, and he is going to introduce himself. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Heidi. So yes, I'm Brad Caton. I work for the CFO Center. I'm the regional director for New England. I have a team of CFOs that I manage. The CFO Center is the world's largest and oldest fractional CFO practice. And I've been in the fractional CFO space for 10 years, and I've done that for 16 companies where I've been their ongoing part-time CFO. Prior to that, I was a general partner in an angel capital fund. It's called the Investors Collaborative. We make investments between New York and Boston. I'm still somewhat involved. And then prior to that, I was a serial entrepreneur for about 20 years, co-founded a number of companies. You can see the companies I was involved with to the right there. I won't go through them, but there they are. And over that time, I was the CEO 3 times. I was actually chief marketing officer twice. And between my entrepreneurial days and being at the Angel Capital Fund, I've been in over 20 board of directors. I'm a registered investment advisor. More pertinent for today, I'm also a certified exit planning advisor through the Exit Planning Institute, and we'll get more into that today. And then I have some other letters to my name. So let me talk now about the Exit Planning Institute. So this is an organization. They're based in the Midwest. They've been around for over 20 years, and their mission really is education. They're trying to educate advisors and educate business owners. There's a great book that the president of EPI has written called Walking to Destiny. I recommend that for anyone who's interested in figuring out your exit plan. It takes you right through a lot of things I'll be talking to about today and much more as well. One of the things EPI does is they certify people to be exit planning advisors. So you have to take a course and pass a pretty rigorous test. There's about 8,000 of us around the country in the United States, or actually around the world, excuse me. So there's two paradigm shifts that the Exit Planning Institute has been advocating for many years. The first is a more holistic approach to exiting your business, in that it's not just about the business, which of course that's a big part of it, but it's also important to know your personal financial goals and what you're trying to achieve with your exit and what are your personal plans after your exit. Very interesting statistic that 75% of business owners have remorse about exiting their company, even with all the money they may have made 1 year after the exit. 75% 1 year afterwards are dissatisfied. So that's what the Exit Planning Institute is trying to change that dynamic. The other paradigm shift is how exit strategy is business strategy. It's the topic of today's webinar, isn't it? It's that exit planning happens today. It's in the present. It's what you're doing today to create value in your company down the road so that you're more likely to sell and more likely to sell at a good price point. So this concept that exit strategy is good business strategy, and it really is. And this is what we're going to talk about, how strategy, business strategy and exit strategy are really intertwined, at least with companies that have sold when looking back of how they got there to their successful exit. So what are the benefits there? Well, just saying that I'm eventually going to sell my company and I want to be in position to sell my company, well, you start adopting certain things that you might not otherwise. And it drives your team to have best in class performance. You get better output from your employees and from your contractors. Also serves as a contingency plan. Another interesting statistic, 50% of businesses sell involuntarily. Like they don't want to sell, but the owner has a heart attack or cancer or there's a divorce or for whatever reason, they're forced to sell the company. And if you're not ready to sell, if you don't have your due diligence ready, you don't have all your papers in order, you can't describe how you're going to continue growing the company, you're not going to sell and it could go to zero. So you want to protect that. And then also non-solicited offers do come across the transom. It does happen. And also you want to be prepared for that. I've seen too many companies in my CFO days that did get unsolicited offers, but weren't ready for it. And they're scrambling to get ready and get all their documents in order. And then the acquiring company kind of loses interest, project fatigue, or they find another company. So you want to be ready. If lightning strikes, you want to be able to capture it in a bottle, so to speak. And then surveys have shown that by getting your business on a strategy that gets you to higher valuation, you're going to have more income. You're going to create more value in your company. You may be thinking to yourself, well, I'm just a small business. I don't only have 1 or 2 or 3 employees. Maybe doesn't matter to me, but it does. You want to align the resources, all your resources, and you probably don't have enough. Most companies don't, with your goals. And that's what strategy is doing, right? It's aligning your activities and your resources to where you're trying to go and what you're trying to achieve. It allows you to compete more effectively with your competitors because they might not have the same strategy, or you might realize that, oh, they're actually not a competitor because they're actually selling to a different customer set. So it helps you figure out who you're selling to and who your competitors are. It helps you to prepare for growth, for funding, of course, for an exit. And it allows you to be more consistent. Without a strategy in place, it's very easy to get distracted and start reacting to whatever's come over. But if you realize that something happens and, well, it doesn't affect what we're trying to do, doesn't affect our strategy or the tactics to achieve that, our execution of the strategy, you just move on. So it helps you be more consistent. Okay, so that was sort of my introduction. So from here, we're going to sort of have three parts till I complete here. One, we're going to talk about business strategy itself. I want to show you some tools and processes. Secondly, I'm going to talk about exit strategy and what you should be thinking about to exit your business and what the Exit Planning Institute preaches. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about the 4 C's. That's where business strategy and exit strategy come together. And let's start with business strategy. Okay, so these are 5 things or 6 things I want to talk about today in terms of business strategy, called 5 tools and 1 process. So we'll go through it, right? So it's a SWOT analysis, Porter's 5 Forces, the business model canvas, value proposition design, also sometimes called the value proposition canvas, KPIs and OKRs, and then the planning process, the strategic planning process, which of course uses a lot of these tools that we'll talk about. So starting with a SWOT analysis, I have a feeling quite a few people on the call today, on the webinar here, have seen this or used this. So for you, it will be a review. But if you haven't seen it, it is a really good tool. It doesn't tell you what to do, but it gives you a way to map your environment and how your company applies to the environment. So strengths, your internal assets. What does your company do well? What are the strengths that the company has? Is it people? Is it a pat you may have? Is it a customer you've signed to an exclusive contract that's one of the biggest customers in the space? List out all your strengths, all the strengths for your company. And then on the other side of the ledger, what are the weaknesses? What are the internal gaps? What is it that the competitors do better than you may do? And overall, what are the weaknesses? Maybe you don't have staffing in certain places. List out all the weaknesses. And then going around I was going to say wheel, but it's a square object, isn't it? But anyway, going around the wheel here, next would be opportunities. What are the market trends? Where can you take advantage of where your sector is going? How can you generate more revenue based on these opportunities? And then with threats, right? What are the market and competitive risks? What does that macro environment look like that is a threat to the business? Where are you exposed? When you've mapped out your weaknesses, well, that's going to provide, will be exposures, threats that you have. And so those kind of almost echo each other a little bit. The weaknesses lead to threats, right? And when you're doing your opportunities, you want to look at the strengths. You want to try to leverage your strengths where you can. So it maps out the environment for you and provides guidance to how you can put your strategy together. SWOT analysis. And it's good to do this every year because things change, right? It'll be pretty similar to your previous year, but there'll be just some differences you'll notice if you do it year to year, which is what we always recommend at the CFO Center. Another model is the Porter 5 Forces. This has been around for a long time. I remember studying this when I was in business school in the 1990s, for gosh sakes, and probably anyone who's been to a business undergraduate or MBA program has seen this. But it's a really good model. It starts with mapping out your industry and then how you might be able to operate better within that industry sector. And I've used this for years and years, and it always seems to play out pretty well to give you a feel for what you're doing and what you need to do. So let's start in the middle. Rivalry among the existing competitors. So these are obviously the companies you're competing with. Some industries don't have a lot of rivalry. I know in parts of New England, for example, the doggy daycare market, one of our clients at SBDC, when I was looking at that, really not a lot of vicious competition. People have their areas geographically bound, and they're pretty friendly with each other. But compare that to, say, the mobile phone industry, cutthroat, big investments, big rivalry. So it starts there. And then you might want to look at it as an X and Y axis. So on the X-axis are the bargaining power of suppliers and the bargaining power of buyers, suppliers and buyers. So the suppliers that you're, say, getting your input to your product or to your service, how much power do they have over you? Are there only 1 or 2 suppliers? So, for example, in the aircraft industry, there's 2 major providers of engines, Rolls-Royce and GE. So they have a lot of power over the airplane manufacturers. As a matter of fact, they tend to design their airplanes around the engines that they're getting from their suppliers. So that's an example of where there's a lot of power by the suppliers. Another example would be De Beers in the diamond industry. For many, many years, they owned as much as 85% of the market. So they had a lot of supplier power. When we look on the other side of this diagram, the right-hand side, uh, buyers. How much buyer power are you facing to your customers? If you're selling a product to consumers, you tend to have a decent amount of power. Now they can band together and give employee reviews, but you tend to have more power in that situation. But if you're in a B2B industry and you're only selling to say a few buyers, they tend to have a lot of power over you. For example, years ago I did a company called Two Wire. We were selling to the telephone companies back when there was a deregulation in 1996, and all these competitive companies, they were called CLECs, competitive local exchange carriers, were popping up. And we started a company to make equipment for them. And oh, great, there's going to be so many buyers. But then there was a technology market crash, and they all went away within 12 months. It was amazing to watch. And then we just had the major bell companies, and they had so much power over the equipment manufacturers. Or another example are their high switching costs. So if you have a vendor and you've built your whole system, your whole internal system around it, it's hard to move out of that into a new IT system, for example. So they'll tend to have power over you. And then looking at say the y-axis, the threat of new entrants into the market. Who could come in and become a new competitor for you? Classic examples of that are Netflix, when they were a new entrant into the video space, and Blockbuster couldn't respond at the end of the day. First with the mail order DVDs, and especially with the streaming, that new entrant ended up putting Blockbuster out of business more than anything else. And then what about substitute products? Kind of related to new entrants, but this is something that often comes out of left field. So it's good to know what that could look like. Good example being during COVID, how Zoom took off. And to this day, Zoom and Zoom meetings has replaced a lot of travel. The travel industry has never caught back up to its revenue from where it was before COVID. So these are the five forces. So you map this out, and plus, you can put plus signs, like 3 plus signs or 3 minus signs, to show strength or weakness and that kind of thing. And that gives you a good view of how you can operate well within your industry. Okay, now we'll move on to the business model canvas. If you have any questions, just hold that for the end. I'm sure people do. The business model canvas is a good way to just get everything that you're trying to do and everything that would be wrapped up in a strategy on one page. I won't read them all, but you can see the different things here that you would do. I think it's best to start with your value propositions. Here's an example. Best Buy, a store we all know. So I figured this was a good example to give. And so if you start with your value propositions as you're doing your canvas here, so they decided that their value propositions were having a wide product selection, knowledgeable staff, competitive pricing, convenient shopping, value-added services, right? So those were their value propositions to their clients. And then from there, you just keep going out. And when you map these all out, things might come to the surface that didn't otherwise. I'll give an example. This is not the case for Best Buy, but just to illustrate. If we look over, say, customer segments on the far right-hand side, we see the first one they list is tech enthusiasts. So let's say their marketing department does some research and finds out, oh my goodness, almost half, let's call it 50% of our clients are actually tech enthusiasts. Well, that will change your strategy, and that will ripple across these other areas on the canvas. So if you had tech enthusiasts, okay, customer relationship, right next to it to the left, knowledgeable staff. Well, maybe we need to have more technical-minded staff, tech-minded staff, to be able to have the tech enthusiast have good experience in the store. And then over the far left-hand side, key partners, well, maybe from your product manufacturers, you want to get technical documents that you can get that will make the tech enthusiast feel good about what they're buying. So things like this, right? So you map everything out. And as you start to learn about different parts of your business, you realize how you can thread together different aspects that will lead to your company strategy and hopefully value creation. Okay, let's move on to another strategic tool, value process design. This is an interesting one. So This is where you start with creating a customer profile. So it starts with that. And sometimes that's even difficult. But when you do map out who you're trying to sell to, then you kind of survey that particular person or this composite of your customer profile. What are their jobs in terms of what are they trying to do or what are they trying to get done in their day, especially what are they trying to get done in relation to your product or service? And then you figure out the gains and the pains that they have, and then that allows you to fill out the value proposition, which comes the other direction by creating gains and pain relievers. And let me show an example of this. So this is from a company I've kept anonymous that creates a job performance tracker, a mobile app. And they decided that their best customer segment, the one they wanted to focus on, the one they wanted to market to, and indeed where they wanted to create their product and value proposition around was low wage hourly paid workers. Not kids, kind of older folks, but that they're low wage and hourly paid. And so if we start to the far right of this, what are their, as they say, customer jobs here? What are they trying to get done and do? Well, they're trying to find steady sources of income. They're trying to get enough shifts per week. They would like to find enjoyable work. Often it's not so enjoyable at the lower end of the scale there. And there's things they're trying to get done in their world, like have enough subsistence for their family and send their kids to school. And then we'll start on the gains, the green on the top there. It's figuring out, okay, well, so that's what they're trying to get done. What can we do, or what are they generally trying to do in our area that would be gains for them? Well, things that are easy to use helps them. Anything that will reduce their income volatility, enhance their income, et cetera. So you map all that out. And then that marries to, of course, on the left-hand side, the value proposition, the box. What are the gain creators? So to a person that's a low wage hourly worker, where there's going to be, and you have your job performance tracker, what are the gains that you can provide for them in your app that, of course, match to the other side of the chart here? And it's the same thing on the bottom, the pains and pain relievers. So what are the pains that your customer has? So limited access to finance due to low credit scores, or running out of cash before the next payday. So if you move over to the left, you can see how we're trying to, or things that could relieve the pain that that we just talked about on the right hand side. And when you put all that together, you're able to then figure out on the far left hand side really what the value propositions for your product and services should be. So in this case, a mobile app and a website. We want to have access to job postings, um, career advice, content specifically low wage employees, and then they have an automatic online profile that will help them get work and be successful. So this is another tool that you could use to figure out how to sharpen your strategy. This is really good to sharpen your strategy. You may have a strategy, but like, how do we do well within that strategy? How do we target our messaging, our marketing, et cetera? And this is a very good tool for that. Okay, KPIs and OKRs. So KPIs are key performance indicators. It's really good to set that up for your company. The old saying is what isn't measured isn't managed. So you want to measure and manage. And so usually that's the revenue, right? Or customers that you're trying to achieve, new customer accounts you're trying to achieve, potentially your margin, churn, and then maybe expense and budget KPIs. So it's really good to have that quarterly basis, monthly or quarterly. I like to do quarterly. Whatever it is, it tells you how you're doing. And related to that is OKRs, objectives and key results. The example here is, okay, we're going to launch a new product and get 1,000, this is another mobile app, launch a new product and get 1,000 users by Q3, by the end of Q3, by the end of September. So OKRs, objectives and key results, push you to achieve new things, ambitious goals. And either or both of these, don't have to do both, but you could, but either of these, they'll make your strategy more real, more tangible, and of course, more trackable. So all these tools and tips I've given all could feed into your overall strategic planning process. So what is a strategic planning process? Well, it tends to be starting with your vision and mission. What are you trying to achieve? It might not be achieving money. It could be things you're trying to achieve in the community. What's a situation analysis, right? So you could use Porter 5 forces or a SWOT analysis to figure out the lay of the land. And then from there, you set your strategic objectives, and you could use KPIs and OKRs for that. You choose your programs, your initiatives, and then you implement them, and you're tracking them, and then you review and adjust as you go. Early on, you might want to adjust even on a monthly basis. As you get going, maybe on a quarterly basis. All right. So we just did a overview of strategy and how you can use strategy in your business. Strategy is really important for exits. We're going to start transitioning now to talking about exit and exit planning. So if you've implemented a strategy and you've operated for a couple few years, you may have doubled or tripled your revenue, increased your margin, you've gotten good employees involved with you, you've gotten to the top of the hill that you were trying to get to. And that enables you now to have a company exit if you wanted to. You have some value, right? You have revenue, you have customers, you have repeatable processes, you've got a team that can continue to build the product or service going forward. When you exit, you are going to be acquired by a company that's bigger than you and has a bigger strategy and is going to co-opt you. It's going to co-opt what you're doing into their strategy. I like to say from the hilltop to the mountaintop. So a private equity firm, for example, might come in and love what you're doing, and they're doing a national roll-up of companies just like yours. And okay, you don't maybe have full control as you did before, but you just got a really nice payout and you're still building your business. All right, that's what exits often amount to. And I want to note that my last point here, that even very small companies, as long as you have a good strategy, can get acquired. I mentioned dog daycare earlier today as an example. I also know that there's a private equity firm that is rolling up dog daycare companies. They've made a number of acquisitions as low as $750,000 in revenue, and they'll pay about 2x revenue. So you can get, say, $1.5 million for your company just because you have a good strategy. Of course, they'd come in and do due diligence, make sure you're exit ready and everything look good. But even small companies can get acquired. So strategy is very important to help you get there. Okay, let's talk about strategy now. So now we're moving into the next module here of today's talk. I want you to think about this. I can't interact with you per se on this, but are you a lifestyle owner or a value creator? No wrong answer here, but it's really important to know, are you running your business and it's really all about you and you're creating revenue, which is in essence income for yourself and for your family? But if you left, there wouldn't really be much there. You're not, say, doing long-term value creation things like patent protection or investing in your team, things like that. You're probably not going to exit. Now, all the stuff we talked about with strategy is very relevant to a lifestyle owner. Very relevant. Absolutely relevant. But exit strategy, not so much. You have to decide to become a value creator and get away from being a lifestyle owner, because very, very few lifestyle businesses end up getting acquired. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through here. But first, I want to talk about the big picture. What's going on out there? There are going to be a lot of exits. There is about $14 trillion of private companies that will transition over the next 10 years. Baby boomers are retiring. Over half the baby boomers are saying they want to exit in the next 5 years, so this decade. And even the Generation X folks that tend to be a little bit more savvy, actually, about businesses exiting, are keen. Over 1/3 are keen on exiting in the next 5 years. One of the big sources for exits is private equity. There's $3 trillion of private equity capital sitting on the sidelines. And of course, strategic buyers have a lot of money too. So there's a lot of exits that will be happening. But there's a lot of challenges for business owners. 60% don't understand their exit options. About half have done no planning at all. 80% don't have a transition advisory team. 80% about don't have a written transition plan. And almost all of them, 94%, haven't figured out what they're going to do next in life. I like to ask people when they say they're retiring, what are you going to do next? And if you talk to business owners, and a lot of them that are younger even, they don't know. And that's what causes dissatisfaction. we'll move on to this next, why it's important for owners. I'll start on the far right, and I'd mentioned this earlier in my talk that 75% of owners that sell their company regret selling after 1 year. There's a number of reasons for that. Some has to do with they feel they could have got a better price, but a lot of it is psychological, that they're not doing what they were doing before. They don't feel the meaning of life. They don't have actions to do. As I also mentioned, 50% of businesses are involuntary. And 80% of wealth, and a lot of times I see it's over 90%, are locked in owners' businesses. So unless we can exit some or all of that value, it's going to be harder to retire, right? All right, exiting. Good to put a roadmap in place, or at least know what a good exit looks like. So it starts with exit planning. That's step one. Define what you want to do, figure out how to figure out what you want to do after your sale, maximize the enterprise value, know what your wealth gap is, know what you want to retire with. So therefore, you know what you need to sell your business for. And many times when we go through this exercise, we find, okay, well, we need to grow the value of the business over 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 years. That's all the exit planning. And then stage two, or step two, is the transition itself. And there's a number of different ways to exit. It can be a third-party sale. If it's a family-based business, it could be an intergenerational transfer. It could be an ESOP where you're basically selling the business to your employees and it becomes a retirement plan for them and an exit plan for you. So different ways to exit. And then the third aspect of this, step three, is having success. And that includes, really is focused here in this roadmap on the post-exit experience. Does everyone get what they need out of it? A lot of time exits have an earnout where you're sort of forced to stay there for a year or two or more. Although often those are great experiences when you've just had an exit and you're enjoying a nice salary without the pressure after the exit. But nonetheless, all that has to be mapped out too, right? So exit planning before it, have a good transition during the exit phase, and then of course have a successful post-exit scenario. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Exit Planning Institute. This is their model of how to do exit planning from kind of cradle to grave. So it's pretty complicated visual here, but technically it's pretty simple. The first phase is just putting a plan together or discovering what things. So discovering what your current business valuation is. And there's a way to do that that isn't necessarily so expensive, that the Exit Planning Institute provides tools for that. And then assessing your personal financial and business goals, as we talked about, that puts together an action plan. And that phase two right there, that's where they say prepare for exit. It's really the same as growing your business. Preparing your exit is the same as growing your business. It's all wrapped around strategy to get you there. So that prepare phase could be many years. And they like to talk about at the Exit Planning Institute doing 90-day sprints. So figuring out what you're going to do on a quarterly basis, setting your objectives, putting your KPIs out there, and then measuring yourself, seeing how you're doing, and repeating that process every 90 days. Some companies are using a thing called the Enterprise Operating System, EOS, and that's a very good system to use during this phase two. And then phase three is deciding to sell, so that every 90 days, as well as measuring yourself and checking how you did last 90 days and what you're going to do the next 90 days is, hey, do you want to grow or exit? And if you want to keep going, fine. But if you decide to sell, well, then you drop out and then you're going through your exit process, maybe with an M&A advisor. So that's their overall model. I'll talk about each briefly here. So the discover phase is, figuring out what your goal is and how much do you need to retire. I touched on that a little earlier, right? And a lot of people have asked me, when do I know when I should sell my business? Well, it's from a monetary standpoint is how much do you want to make from your business, right? And if you're older and you're going to sell your business to retire, it's how much do you need to retire? There's an old trick for that too, by the way, the 4% rule, which says that to create a 30-year retirement plan, you should divide what you need by, let's say you need $100,000. Well, for that, your portfolio should allow that 4% to equal $100,000 that you're taking out every year. Anyway, so you discover what you need to do, you figure out your value today, and you do this by doing an exit ready assessment. Is your business ready to exit? Some of the things we've touched on previously, even the simple things like, do you have a due diligence room? Do you know what you want to sell your company for? Right. And that's where the business valuation comes into play. How are you doing against the industry? What is it worth today? And then because a lot of times when we're doing this, right away it comes up that there's some things that just aren't being done that are risks to the business, like not the right insurance or no insurances, or the top 3 customers aren't under contract, things like that. Immediately take a de-risking action plan. So this is all the things that are done in phase 1, right? It's, are you ready to exit? What's your business valuation? What things can you do immediately to de-risk? And even knowing your exit options. And then phase 2, as I mentioned, they call it prepare in the Exit Planning Institute's parlance. It's really growing your business. So here you want to create a 3 to 5 year vision. Strategy is so important here, right? Focus on the next year and then the next 90 days within that as you're executing. So have a vision and then execute on a yearly and 90-day, quarterly basis. Make sure you have the team. Make sure there's accountability. It's a big thing in EOS, for example, the enterprise operating system. Accountability. They have accountability teams and meetings. So you say you're going to do things that are going to achieve goals for the company. Did you do it? Right. And you have to be accountable for those things. And you can see the things you do. You commit your resources. You measure with KPIs and OKRs. Have a rhythm. And every 90 days, you're revisiting this and setting new goals. And hopefully, right, you're kind of moving up the value ladder as you do this. Important as you're doing this is to differentiate between strategic and non-strategic actions. It's okay, you have to do a lot of non-strategic things, but when you're doing strategic things, just realize that those are more important. That's what creates value. As I mentioned, de-risk first. Work on that. The very first thing you start working on the phase 2. You want to set your goals and develop your strategy. And as you're growing, say after the first 90 days, after you've de-risked and done things like put insurance in place or particular contracts, work on efficiency first, right? Maybe the whole first year is working on things to get more efficient and then focus on growth, right? When you've created a really good platform for the company to grow, start growing. And part of this is making sure your culture, your company culture is adequate and improving that company culture. It's one of your 4 C's of selling your company and creating value. We'll come to that in a minute. Same with your talent, your human capital. So you need to work on that. As you'll see, 80% of company value is things that don't have monetary value, like a brand, like your culture, the people on your team, etc. And then when you get into phase 3, it's moving into exiting. It's really pretty straightforward. Every 90 days, you want to keep growing the business? Yes. No, I don't. I'm ready to exit for whatever reason. And then you initiate a move to exiting where you may bring in an M&A advisor and start that process. The Exit Planning Institute talks about 8 types of exits, 4 inside, 4 outside. It can be, I won't read them all, but you can kind of tell what they are here. The sale to third party on the right-hand side, that's what most of us think with an exit, selling to a competitor or a strategic in your space or adjacent to your space or a private equity firm. But there are 8 ways to exit, 8 ways to leave your company. Anyway, all right. So now I want to talk about where exit strategy and business strategy come together nicely, which is creating the strategy for your human capital, your customer capital, your structural capital, and your social capital. So human capital, that's the talent on your team, the folks that you've brought on. If you're a business owner, it's very important to sell your company to have a team below you that can take over. It's okay if you stay with the company afterwards, but again, you don't want to be a lifestyle owner. You want to be a value creator. Value creators have teams, and it's not all about themselves. Customer capital, that's the strength of your customer relationships. How many customers do you have? What's your retention? What's your churn? How much power do they have over you? Customer capital. And then structural capital. That's the back-end infrastructure. That's the intellectual property, patents if you have them. That's the documentation of your workflow and your processes, structural capital. And then social capital, well, that's your culture, that's your brand, that's what other people are saying about you. That's when you can cast a long shadow, some say, based on your social capital. So these are the four C's, the four capitals. And surveys have shown that, and studies have shown that about 80% of an exit, sometimes more than that, are these intangibles. It's not the machinery that you have. It's not your bank balance. It's how you have things that are going to help you create more profit or more earnings in the future. So with human capital and your strategy for that, so now that you've created your company strategy and you need to grow and you're growing, well, it's good to have a human capital strategy. So what are you looking for in your new employees? Right? Job descriptions are important in this regard. And then how are you going to motivate them and train them and keep them appreciating working with you? And how do you grow your talent over time? What's the professional development plan you're going to have for them? Right? So human capital strategy is important, knowing that this is important also for your exit strategy, right? And to operate your business. And in terms of customer capital, how strong are your relationships with your clients, your key clients? Are they documented? Are they under contract? How valuable are you to your customer success? I've seen suppliers completely integrate themselves into their customers where they even have people working on their customer sites and they become indispensable to them. That is good customer capital. And the structural capital. What are the processes you're putting in place? Are you documenting them? Have you done a workflow analysis? Is what people are doing efficient day to day? Do you have the right systems and automation tools in place? How about your equipment and facilities? Are they being used efficiently? If you have a giant studio, let's say, and you only use it a few times a year, well, rent it out, right? So you're not just burning money on rent payments or mortgage payments. And then social capital strategy. What are people saying about yourself? What's your brand promise? What's your company culture? Do people want to work there? Is your company culture transferable to the new owner? That's a very important one. So working on these four C's, the strategy for these four C's is very much integrated towards working towards your exit. So we've come to the end here. So in summary and in review, exiting is made in the present. It's what you're doing today, the value you're creating today that will build up over time and lead to your exit. And the success of exiting is very much tied to strategy, as we talked about. I'm advocating everyone on the call today to adopt strategies and tools, whether it's a SWOT analysis, Porter 5 forces, or some of the Canvas tools out there. And, the middle stage of the EPI, the Exit Planning Institute's model, the grow stage or prepare stage, as they call it, it's growing by strategy and execution. Putting a strategy in place and executing it. And you execute it right by measuring it with KPIs, OKRs, et cetera. And as I mentioned, the four C's, they bring exit plan and strategy together, right? The human capital, the customer capital, structural capital, and social capital. Okay, so with that, I'm done with my presentation and we will move to questions.
It was great, Brad. I'll start with a question. We often find, and in prior, I've worked for entrepreneurs before where they get excited about or are ready to, exit, but it always seems to be that they don't realize that when you come to the decision that you're going to exit, that this is just the beginning of the journey of getting prepared to exit.
Mhm.
Do you find that that's typically the case where people realize that I'm ready to do this now, but you need a few years of just getting ready to do so to successfully exit the way that you want to versus just say like a fire sale?
Exactly right, Michael. Yeah. Yeah, people think, and even when the Exit Plan Institute very first started, it was all about, okay, you're going to exit and what to do going forward. What's that process look like? But you're absolutely right. some people say it's even 3 years or more in advance, you should start your exit planning. And there's so many things you want to do. You want to get your documents in order. You want to fill in the gaps you have. Maybe you don't have the right staffing. Um, like maybe you want your largest customer is, if your largest customer is over 25% of your overall revenue, that can be a deal killer. And if you have, so we want to moderate that over time. So yeah, exit planning is something that happens really all along the way as you're growing your business. And when you are ready to exit, if you've been ready, you've been planning, then it's pretty quick. You've got your documents in place. You can get a deal done in 3 to 6 months. But if you're not ready, it can cause issues. And I've seen companies take as much as a year then to get ready to exit. And by then, the potential acquirers have left or moved on.
Yeah. Another thing that you had touched on was culture and people. And it seems like for a lot of organizations, at least, well, maybe not all of them, but it's so heavily founder focused. And that the idea of the founder, there might be an earnout associated with an acquisition, but the idea of them not sticking around as being part of the organization moving forward might lead people to want to leave. What are some of the key things to consider as you're preparing to exit in terms of getting people in place, or the right people in place, and setting them up to stay after the fact to make sure
Mhm.
that the organization continues to operate but continues to grow and be successful for the acquiring company?
Yeah, yeah, great point, great question. The number one reason why deals fail when an owner operator is trying to sell their company is that the business is too dependent on the owner. Number one reason. Well, that and the business owner thinks the value is too high. But those are the two top reasons. I can't remember which one's higher than the other. So the thing you can do there is start to create a management team. And it needs to be 3 people. I haven't really seen it work too well with 2, but if you have at least 3 people that are different areas of the business, tends to be functional based. So someone in terms of say marketing and sales, someone in head of finance and administration, as examples, right? Get 3 key people that are, and maybe someone handling the service operations, whatever, underneath you. And it can't be someone that doesn't have a resume for it. It has to be someone that has some level of skills. But if you're but if they're not quite there, you work to get them there over a year or two. And if you can show that they've matured in their position, acquirers will be great to have that value add within there. So that's the number one thing you can do as an owner operator if you're doing a lifestyle business, is to start to transition that by getting some key people underneath you.
That's a great one. We did get a question in the chat. How is exit planning applicable to a small service-based family teaching business, and how much should I budget to get help for one if needed?
Mm-hmm. Well, service businesses can sell just as well as product businesses. Um, the way to go about that is to make sure you've got good financial metrics with the service. Um, they're always looking at the margins. So even for service businesses, the thought being that gross margin, even for a service business, is a value, an indicator of the value that you're producing on top of your raw input, et cetera, your labor in this case. So certainly have that mapped out. Um, figure out how you can grow the company, based on the model that you have today. And if you create a good brand and a good culture and a track record with repeatable revenue, you could get acquired by companies, a competitor, maybe a private equity firm that's doing a roll up in the education space. The key is just to get ready for it and to have the financial profile to be acquired.
Brad, can I ask a follow-up to that? Um,
Mhm.
if this, I don't know that it is, but if this happened to be a family business that the owners wanted to exit, but they wanted to transition to the next generation,
Mhm.
can you speak to that for just a minute about
Yeah,
planning for
sure,
that?
sure, absolutely. Yeah, there's different ways to do that. One, you can literally gift it to the next generation. But there's talk to your financial advisor if you are doing this, because there are ways for tax purposes to do it so it's more friendly. Like a trust mechanism is a good way to do that if it's to, say, family members. If you have a number of family members that are involved as employees, and you also have a number of employees that you also value, which is often the case as well. A lot of times I've seen business owners value their employees as much as their family members that are in the business. A really good path to take is an ESOP, employee stock option plan. It's not just stock options like people think. It's actually an official retirement plan covered under ERISA, where you're selling the company to your employees, and they're basically over time funding the payment to you as the owner. And often bank financing gets involved with this as well. And so if you've been around for a lot of time, for a number of years, you have to have been around for at least 5 years to do this, but you've got a track record of revenue, that could be a very good way to go about exiting your business. It's an internal transfer too, where you don't need an external buyer to come in and do negotiations with. You do have to get an outside business valuation, but that's it. Other than that, it's pretty much an internal transaction.
Great. And I know that SBDC has a lot of resources on exit planning. So if you are thinking in that direction, to connect with an SBDC advisor is a really great thing. And I think that the LEAF program can apply in that way. Or, at least to get some advice, some further advice on the financial pieces of planning for exit strategy. But we do have some other resources, and our advisors have worked with many companies who've gone through a variety of exits. And as Brad said, starting early to do the planning for it is the first key, according to our advisors. If there are no other questions, shall we close up here?
Sure. Great. Well, I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brad. That was really great information. All right. Thank you very much for coming.